All right, let's talk about the collapse of R&R Family of Companies, because the way things went down was chaotic, fast, and left a lot of people exposed. Over the last few weeks, FreightWaves has been piecing together what actually happened behind the scenes as R&R collapsed. And the picture that's emerging is pretty ugly. Now, first, let's talk about R&R. At their peak, R&R operated a large network of trucking and brokerage businesses across multiple states. They employed more than 500 W-2 drivers, brokers, mechanics, and even office staff, and they even had hundreds more of freight agents and contractors. Its portfolio included brokerage and transportation companies like R&R Express, RFX, Taylor Express, Giant Energy Solutions, and GT Worldwide Logistics. But by late 2025, the cracks were already forming. Carriers, owner-operators, and credit providers began reporting slow payments, missed payments, and tightening credit terms. Now, some carriers decided to start rejecting loads outright from the company. Factoring companies started to pull back, and vendors started to restrict services. Internally, sources say real estate and assets were allegedly quietly sold off in an effort to raise cash. And that's when things really accelerated. In mid-January, R&R abruptly shut down its trucking subsidiary, Taylor Express, with absolutely no warning. All employees were laid off immediately. Fuel cards were shut off, rental car accounts were shut off, and vendor relationships were terminated. Now, this is the worst part, and it even left a lot of drivers stranded. According to former employees, some drivers were hundreds of miles from home with no fuel support, no travel assistance, and no management team to help them. At least one driver reportedly slept in his truck near the terminal to figure out how he was going to get home. And others relied on family to wire them money so they could drive back and get home. Taylor Express, according to federal SAFER records, had over 100 power units and more than 100 drivers at the time of their shutdown. But this is just the beginning. Behind the scenes, weeks earlier, court filings show that lenders had been sounding the alarm for weeks before this shutdown happened. A lawsuit filed by Huntington National Bank alleges that R&R and its affiliates were deeply insolvent, losing millions of dollars and sitting on tens of millions in unpaid trade payables, including carrier invoices, while continuing to operate. According to the complaint, R&R reported nearly $26 million in net operating losses in 2025 alone. And by late 2025, unpaid trade payables had allegedly climbed to roughly $65 million. By mid-December, lenders say they urged R&R to wind down operations in an orderly fashion due to a lack of liquidity. The company refused, and they continued to operate as normal. R&R even hired a turnaround firm, which concluded that the business would need at least $25 million in new capital just to survive. Lenders reviewed the plan and rejected it as unworkable, but operations continued nevertheless. Then came some of the most controversial allegations. Just days before the collapse, when negotiations with lenders were ongoing and insolvency was allegedly clear, court filings allege that R&R's founder and his wife transferred ownership of a multi-million-dollar Florida property from the company to themselves personally. Now, lenders allege that that move was designed to shield the asset from creditors, and that transfer is now subject of an ongoing litigation. All in the meanwhile, carriers were still hauling freight for the company. Multiple lawsuits now allege R&R's brokerage units continued tendering loads even as finances deteriorated and payments stopped going out. One Texas logistics company claims it prepaid carriers based on assurances from R&R entities, only to be left holding more than $260,000 in unpaid invoices. And another carrier alleges it hauled more than 600 loads and is now owed more than $1.3 million. Former employees that spoke to FreightWaves say that many internal teams didn't know how bad things were until it was too late. Sales staff continued reassuring carriers and shippers that payments were coming, only to find out days later that invoices weren't being paid at all. And that left brokers and agents directly in the line of fire, with carriers calling them shippers being contacted directly by unpaid trucking companies, and years-long relationships ruined overnight. And for the bond? Well, as multiple carriers have pointed out, the federal required broker bond is only $75,000. Something we've talked about in recent shows and recent episodes that we've done here. And as you know, once that $75,000 broker bond is exhausted, recovery options shrink fast, especially for small carriers who cannot afford the prolonged legal battles that something like this would need. But the fallout doesn't stop with R&R. Now, in a separate interview, the former CEO of another freight company said his businesses were forced to shut down after a lender restricted access to working capital, a move he said stemmed from litigation tied to R&R. Now, that raised concerns that the financial damage rippled beyond R&R's own network. And as of now, there's been no bankruptcy filing that's been confirmed for R&R or any of its subsidiaries. But as of today, the lawsuits still keep coming. The carrier complaints continue to surface, and unsecured creditors are left trying to figure out recovery options, if any are possible. Now, at its core, this wasn't just a company failure. It was truly a case study in what happens when operations continue while insolvency deepens, and while carriers, drivers, and the frontline employees are really the last ones to know. And for the small trucking companies and owner-operators who are already operating on super slim margins, even a few unpaid invoices can be absolutely devastating, especially in a market in a freight recession like we've been in for the last 3 years. Multiply that across tens of thousands of loads, and that damage becomes catastrophic. Now, while thousands of employees, drivers, and owner-operators and small carriers were impacted by R&R and their subsidiaries shutting down, the Department of Transportation is finally cracking down on cross-border cabotage, something you don't want to miss. Check it out here.